Persha Valman. I am based out of Tel Aviv. I am a VP Finance and CFO, formerly the VP Finance of Chorus before we exited. I am on my next journey. My first job, real job, was actually lecturing. I was a lecturer at a university for the most exciting subjects of all: accounting, auditing, corporate law. And I have to tell you, I learned to feel comfortable just speaking in front of people and also breaking down complex ideas into a way that can be taught. And I think that that's pretty much, helped me throughout my career. I feel comfortable speaking and also just breaking down the ideas to make good decisions. So in terms of building in-house, my philosophy on that is actually to do an MVP, a minimum viable product in-house. Use the tools you have. We had G Suite, so it's Google spreadsheets and it's forms and all these kind of things and all different, systems you currently have. Do what you need to do on those first. First of all, sometimes that solution, as simple as it is, actually works. No need to invest in some other system. But actually what we have found is that when you do that, you see your pain points. So you actually see what does this not solve. So then when you go look for a system, you find what you actually need. And that's been one of the best ways. And I can tell you a good example of that is when I worked at 𝐇𝐞𝐭𝐳, we were all of a sudden told we had to pay thousands of contributors within 2 months. This was an enormous task. Thousands all over the world. Something that was very new to the market at the time because there wasn't such a thing as mass payments prior to that. And so what we went and did is we actually did a lot of it manually in the beginning. Excel, spreadsheets, working with the banks. And we learned really what the pain points. When we went to go out and find the solution, we were very fortunate to come across 𝐇𝐞𝐭𝐳. And 𝐇𝐞𝐭𝐳 was a very young company there. We happened to become their second customer. And the amazing thing is that I knew what I needed and they knew what I needed. And therefore they built the system to actually help us to work. And then, we worked with them many, many years. And as you know, today they've become an extremely successful company. But it came from the fact of understanding what really were the pain points. In my early days, I did auditing, so I worked and saw through the eyes of an auditor very, very large enterprise companies. They were fascinating and interesting, but the truth is that I just always knew for myself that I belonged in the startup world. I love to move fast. I love to build things. I love to create it. So you're the person who's putting down the foundations for that company and how that will be built for the future. And also just everything moves faster. You make a decision within a week or two, you can have it implemented. As I've seen in the larger companies we work with, everything is just a lot slower, a lot more deliberate, and it has to be. It impacts a lot more people, a lot more systems, but I just love to move fast and build things. The market's getting flooded. Our email inboxes are flooded. I must probably get, 10 inbounds a day. Most of them I'm ignoring. The majority I'm ignoring, though I have to say it's not a bad thing because it definitely creates awareness. And when I'm looking for what I'm looking for, I often remember the name. I would say a lot of what we have used is also, I'd say, peer assisted. I'm part of a CFO group. And if I'm looking for something, I go to my fellow CFOs and say, who have you used, what you've used? And so we certainly help each other. Also through the VCs, and interestingly enough, well-connected VCs often will suggest to us something if we're looking for something. So we often speak to them as well. But I would say, those are most probably the key ways in which I find the products I'm looking for. Yes, I don't think it's unique to finance, but I think hiring is one of the big struggles everyone's struggling with at the moment. There's a great need also in the finance space as well. Just hiring the right people, keeping the right people, and growing the right people. So those are, I think, one of your biggest challenges. The other challenge that we're seeing is also just, I think, onset from COVID is the fact that remote working is the way to go, or semi-remote. But what it's doing is it's creating a lot of tax nexus issues, issues of how to manage it from the back end in terms of finance, salaries, tax implications. And I don't think a lot of companies have considered what those implications will be. So even though we want to give people the flexibility, the question is, what does it do for the company in the long run in terms of the risks it's taking on? I would say one area that all our CFOs are still struggling with is how to measure R&D. It's becoming more and more expensive, that's for sure. And the question is, how do we measure the efficiency? How do we measure where we should be investing there, and what the outputs are? And that really is something that I don't know if anyone has actually nailed that, maybe in larger corps, larger enterprise, but certainly on the startup space, that is not something that we've managed to nail. I mean, I would say our roles have already evolved. I think finance was always seen very much as a back-end role, a very support role, and I don't think it is that today. I think that the finance is the one central hub of a company. It knows what's going on in every single function in the company, often creating the link between them, and also understanding where the investments should be put. Understanding not just the risks that need to be adhered to, but also what's working and where do we need to invest more. So I think that really it's quite a pivotal role in terms of understanding the direction of the company and where we're heading. That means for any finance exec that you've got to really understand the nuts and bolts of every single department. It's not just understanding the finance side of it, but actually understanding what makes it tick, what makes it work, what kind of people need to be hired there, etc. And I think that is I think it's already evolved, and I think any finance exec who thinks that it's a very, very narrow role isn't going to succeed in those roles. Well, when you're working in a startup that is both Israel and US based, specifically San Francisco, a large part of your life is either dealing with the Israel side or the US side, which makes a pretty intense environment. They're a lot of fun. I would say for myself personally, I've had to just find mechanisms in which to give myself some time out. I'm very creative at heart. So I love doing it's a book called The Artist Way, and it's how to unblock creativity. And one of the methods of that is to do what's called morning pages, in which you write 3 pages every day that are just, whatever you feel like writing without much thought. And I think it is a way of dealing with a lot of the issues and releasing a lot of the thoughts that go in your head all day long, and allowing you to actually, sometimes find a solution or at least let yourself move on to other things. So I think that's one of the things that I do. In terms of relaxing, I have 3 kids, three adult daughters, 21, 18, and 16. And then there is never a dull moment. We're having a lot of fun all the time. They remind me often when I'm not doing right, which is great. And at the same time as we just have a great time together. So I would say I spend a lot of time with my kids, my family, my husband. And I would say, actually, to be honest, the only thing that's managed to keep me in this crazy, I would say, US, Israel function is the fact that I do take 24 hours off every single week on a Shabbat. And that allows me to just rejuvenate, reconnect with those I love and care for, and start the new work week totally refreshed. And I would say that's one of the reasons I can actually manage in this high-paced environment.